Hello and welcome to a Firstpost POV. It's a crucial day in Washington because US President Donald Trump is meeting his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky was hoping to go to Washington and convince Trump to sell him the cruise missile called the Tomahawks. Now, these have been pitched as a game changer if they are ever sold to Ukraine. But hours before Zelensky landed, Trump had a surprise phone call with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. And after the call, there seems to be a change in the US president's position. Trump not only wavered on his suggestion that he could give the Tomahawk missiles, he also announced that he would be meeting Vladimir Putin in a couple of weeks from now in Budapest. The question is, are these missiles now completely off the table? And what should we look forward to when Trump meets Putin in Budapest? Let me put some of these questions to my guest, a former British Lieutenant Colonel, Glen Grant, who's also a former advisor to the Ukrainian defense minister. He's been watching this war very closely. Thank you so much, Mr. Grant, for speaking to us on First
Thank
Post.
you.
Let's talk about that call President Trump had with Putin just hours before Zelensky was due to arrive in Washington. Do you think it was timed by the Kremlin in such a way to sort of precede Zelensky's arrival and to throw a spanner in the works of what the Ukrainian side was hoping to achieve in Washington?
I think we all have to be realistic and say that none of us knows what Trump is really thinking, except for the fact that he loves Putin more than he loves Ukraine. I think that is very clear. It's been clear since the beginning of Trump's time, this time round. So we have to expect that what Trump is doing really is looking for an excuse not to give those weapons to Ukraine. I mean, he said, "We need them," was one of his ideas, and I think that, you know, talking to Putin is his way of getting a get out of jail free card, so that he's got some excuses to speak when he sees Zelensky.
Why do you think he then suggested this whole Tomahawk idea? Because it did trigger a sort of sharp reaction from the Kremlin, with Putin saying this would be a qualitative escalation by the Americans in this war. Was the idea to always put some sort of pressure on the Russians to get these talks, or was Trump ever serious about giving these missiles to Ukraine?
I don't think we should give him too much credit for even understanding what Tomahawk is or what it was. I suspect that someone used the word or he heard it from Zelensky and then spoke about it without ever getting a proper brief on the thing. I mean, we know that America is actually not flush with Tomahawk missiles. They've only got something like 3,000, and they're using them quite regularly on places like Iran and on other wars. So I suspect that he was then told that this is not a good idea. Of course, it's a good idea for Zelensky. It's a good idea for Ukraine, even though there are lots of technical difficulties with it. But my guess is that he's just suddenly been sobered up by his staff and by people that really they don't want to give any to Ukraine because of all the ramifications of doing so.
Qualitatively, what are these missiles bringing to the table, though? I get the point that you're making that Trump was never serious about giving it. He probably just heard it from Zelensky or somebody else and just began peddling it. But as a machine, as a weapon, how effective are these Tomahawks? And I ask because we've heard about a lot of these so-called game-changer weapons in the war. We had the Storm Shadow missiles, we had the HIMARS, we had the F-16 jets that were given to Ukraine, but they've never really made much of an impact when it comes to Ukraine getting some land back or making some meaningful attacks on Russia. So are these new Tomahawk missiles going to be a game changer if Trump was to give it to them?
That's a good question. I mean, remember first that Tomahawk is basically a naval missile fired from ships and submarines. Well, Ukraine hasn't got that. It's also fired from aircraft like B-1 bombers, and Ukraine certainly hasn't got that, which means they've got to fire them from land launchers, and there are very few of those around at the moment. And I guess the American Army and Marines want to keep those that they've got. So even if it comes, it would take a while before they could actually get the missiles and a launcher, and before they could actually use them, adding in training time, maintenance training time, and other things. Okay, now, when they fire them, what we've seen with the Russians is that they're very, very quick at adapting to whatever Ukraine throws at them. So my guess is that Tomahawk could be effective long range and at all sorts of different targets, but only in the first weeks. So they would actually have to fire lots of them at one go to get through the air defense system. But after a few weeks, I suspect the Russians would come up with a solution for dealing with them. And then, as you mentioned, like all the other systems that we've heard about, they would just lose their strength and just be another missile. Remember, they're not actually that fast. So we're not actually talking about something that's super clever, like some of the ballistic missiles that are being fired. So we have to wait and see.
Now, you mentioned air defenses there, and that is something that people have been talking about because Russia is such a vast country, so it's difficult to cover all of it with the existing air defenses. Would that be one reason why Putin gave that warning, saying this would be a qualitative escalation if the Americans were to give it? Or was it just him indulging Trump, saying, oh, I've heard your threat and I'm acknowledging it?
50-50, I would think. And certainly he's indulging Trump. I mean, the whole of that the results of that telephone call was just pure indulgence on Trump's part. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't say, we're going to give you the Nobel Peace Prize from Russia afterwards. But missiles like this depend upon intelligence from America. They depend upon US systems actually highlighting where at the moment the air defense systems are in Russia, so that the Tomahawk can actually weave its way around the air defense to get to its target. And without that, they're in a danger of losing them wherever they go.
Right. The next step, obviously, after this call is the much-hyped peace summit that will happen in Budapest between President Trump and Putin. We know that Trump is just fresh off some success in West Asia, and therefore he feels it's going to be a bit easy to bring Ukraine and Russia to the table and crack out a peace deal. So what do you expect to happen in Budapest? Will it be more of what we saw in Alaska, a lot of pictures, a lot of symbolism and handshakes, but nothing concrete at the end of it?
First of all, it's got to happen. And I just noticed before I came on, when I was looking at the news, that Putin has actually sort of made some comments that there have got to be a lot of steps put in place before he would come. I mean, remember, he's going right into the heart of NATO, and he's a cautious man at best. This is not Alaska where he can just pop across the water. He's actually got to fly round and over NATO countries. So that's one thing. And secondly, he's got to understand that Trump is going to squash Ukraine in the process. Because if Trump is not going to squash Ukraine, there is no reason for Putin to come, because he is not going to give in anything. There will be no compromise from Putin, not a shred. He's not in that sort of mood. He thinks he's doing well, especially since he's now got the Czech Prime Minister on his side. And in many ways, you could say he is. So don't expect too much from this. It may never happen.
And what about the other side then? Because President Zelensky was clearly hoping for more military support from the Americans, if not the Tomahawks, then some other sort of US technology. Is there now a recognition in Kyiv that with President Trump in office, a deal is the only way to go forward, and resisting Russia on the battlefield is not going to be a long-term option for them?
No. And I think there's a line you said there, which may not be quite right, because I don't think that the support from America is going to be the game changer. It's going to be if Kiev can hang on for another couple of years, then it will be the support from the European companies that are working their way quickly to try and produce even better weapons than the ones coming from America. What they can't reproduce, of course, is the intelligence yet. But Kiev needs to keep hanging on, because I don't think that they're ever going to get enough from America to win this war, unless they pay vast billions to Trump in the background. What he wants is money. He's not interested in Ukraine winning.
Are you confident that the Europeans will be able to gang up, though? We've seen a lot of deadlock in Brussels when it comes to not just support for Ukraine, even just political support for Ukraine. So will they be able to gang up and raise this sort of money or hand over these sort of weapons to Ukraine? I know the winter is coming and the battle lines will be frozen for a bit, but when these battle lines unfreeze and when the battle resumes on the ground, can they really hang on for 2 years without American support?
The answer to that is yes. They may go backwards a lot further, but they can still hang on because they're stubborn and they want to. But I think you've got to differentiate between European businesses and European bureaucracy, because it's the businesses that are pushing forward. It's the Rheinmetals and companies, startups coming out of UK and Germany and the Netherlands that are actually starting to produce things that are really quite clever. Then it's a matter of will those startups get money through the bureaucracy of the European Union. But I think the European Union is slow, but it'll sort itself out within the next couple of years for funding those things that actually Ukraine needs.
Right. So that's the outlook for the next coming years. But what about what we're expecting to happen later today in Washington? Those two meetings that Mr. Zelensky had with Trump, they were extremely different. The first one was effectively a shouting match. The second one was much warmer. What do you expect to happen today, especially in the backdrop of that phone call with Putin and Trump?
Well, I think that Zelensky has learned very clearly now that he has to play up to Trump, and he has to play all the nice games and talk nicely to him. And I think he will keep his patience, whatever happens. Remember, he's a consummate actor. I mean, a brilliant actor. And he knows that in this game with Trump, he has to act his best. And he will hope that continuing to play the long game, that Trump at least will not do anything bad to Ukraine and Zelensky, even if he doesn't get Tomahawk, that the rest of the sales that are now coming online with European money will continue and put money into the American budget and keep Trump happy.
Right. Finally, let me just ask you about what Trump could want to do for his short term. We saw what he did in West Asia, which is essentially use all the leverage that he had over Israel and over the Arab allies and therefore Hamas to effectively bring them both to a ceasefire. In this case, he doesn't have as much leverage with the Russians, but he does have adequate leverage with the Ukrainians. Do you see him using all of that and forcing Zelensky into a peace deal in the short term until the Europeans are able to perhaps get their affairs in order?
I think there's a problem there. I mean, he will try. He will try to actually to persuade Zelensky that a ceasefire and peace is a good thing. But Putin will not give him that. Zelensky may say yes, knowing that Putin will not give him that. But if Zelensky actually does anything that the country does not want, then you might see a quick revolution in Ukraine and Zelensky removed, because people have lost too much blood, too much treasure in this war to give in for something that's half-hearted. Even for Donald Trump, they will fight on alone.
And just to follow up on Putin, how do you expect him to handle this then? Do you just expect him to keep indulging Trump, meeting him whenever necessary, but then just keep fighting on the battlefield until the tide turns completely in his favor?
I think that's what he wants, yes. And I mean, he can. I don't think he's worried about what happens behind the front lines. I think he's just working his way on the front line to reach the point where he can say to his own public that we've won. And that is, frankly, that is quite a long way away yet.
Right. Well, I think right now a lot of this peacekeeping is being driven by President Trump and his personal pursuit for just recognition and the Nobel Peace Prize. There's not really a lot of strategy or deep thought that is going into this process. And that is effectively the problem with the sort of peacemaking that we're seeing around the world. We'll be tracking what happens in Washington closely. But thank you so much, Mr. Grant, for speaking to us on Firstpost.
No, not at all. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.